Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our presentation, Replace Your Legacy Fax Server, It's Easier Than You Think. We've had a tremendous turnout for this event, so we're going to wait just another minute or two to make sure everyone is able to join us. But what our large audience tells us today is that replacing a legacy fax server is on the minds of a lot of IT professionals. So if you are considering a change, you're not alone. And that's really what today's presentation is all about. While making a change to your legacy fax server may seem like a daunting challenge, it's really easier than you think. So before we dive into the presentation, I want to cover just a few housekeeping items. Most importantly, you should see a questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to write in your questions at any time, and at the end of that presentation, we will answer as many questions as time allows. But rest assured, if we're not able to answer your specific question, we will reach out to you directly and make sure you get the information that you need. So let's talk about today's agenda. We all know there are challenges to be considered when making a change to a legacy fax server. But we have a very special customer with us today who replaced 15 legacy fax solutions. And we're going to talk in depth about that process and how he evaluated new fax solutions and share the details of how IIS and BizCom helped him through the process of migrating his many integrations and custom applications. We will also talk about BizCom Enterprise Fax Management and how this sophisticated management tool has streamlined the administration, reporting, and monitoring of his very complex environment. And then we'll show you a live demo of how that works. And finally, we'll wrap up with a few minutes of Q&A. So joining us today for this presentation is a panel of speakers, all of whom were instrumental in making this migration from 15 fax solutions to the BizCom solution a success. I am very honored to welcome our customer, David Burdett. David is the IT service manager for a large global enterprise in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry. David is the brave soul who was tasked with consolidating a very diverse and complex environment of fax applications into a single solution. And helping him in this endeavor and joining us today are Antoinetta Carboni, Director of Channel Development with BizCom and a fax industry guru, and Gus Agadello, Senior Development Engineer at BizCom and the primary BizCom technical resource for this project. From Instant Infosystems, I'm happy to introduce David Angelitis, Director of Sales, and Juan Cueva, Director of Technical Services. David was the key resource who assisted David Burdett in the evaluation of a new fax solution, and Juan worked alongside Gus to help ensure the technical transition was as seamless as possible. So when you registered for today's webinar, we asked you a few questions about your primary concerns and considerations for making the switch from your existing fax server to a new fax solution. And here's what you had to say. The biggest challenge with your current solution seems to be old or antiquated hardware and software, which needs updating or replacing. And then close behind are issues with system reliability, transmission errors, and call failures. Chances are all of those problems may be related to the outdated software and hardware. So if an upgrade is needed, now is the perfect time to consider your options. And then when considering the biggest obstacle in changing your fax environment, hands down, your concerns centered around migrating your integrations, applications, and workflows. So we will discuss that in depth today and show you how David Burdett and his team overcame that challenge. So without any further delay, I am very pleased to turn the presentation over to David Angelitis, Antoinetta Carboni, and David Burdett.
Thank you for the introduction, Julie. So we want to get started today with, for a lot of our customers, replacing the legacy fax environment or fax server can seem like a very daunting task. And more so, I think, than ever in the past, and we've been in the fax industry for over 25 years, we're seeing more and more customers that are asking us to help them with this evaluation. And I think it's a lot of our customers have legacy systems that they're looking at. Is it time to upgrade? And a lot of times there's some significant investment involved in making that upgrade. And then, of course, with the onset of the cloud being a viable option, now we're seeing a lot more of our customers ask us to evaluate cloud configuration options and if that might be a part of their process for replacing a legacy system. And then I think even more so than that, we have a lot of customers looking at the legacy platform and now taking a deeper search into, is there a new platform that they could utilize that would either provide greater functionality or better meet the needs of their business, or also just simply reduce cost of what the legacy system is amounting to, especially when looking at what a significant upgrade may take. And involved in that conversation, as you'll see on the screen, is a lot of different topics that our customers ask us about and that we have to do a lot of investigation into. And I know, Antonetta, you spend a lot of time going through these topics with the customers that you work with as well. And I think one of the major concerns here, too, is anytime you make a major change like this is the transition support piece of it, and how you're able to go from a system you're using today to an entirely new platform, and how the business is going to accommodate that without having a significant disruption of service or causing a negative impact to the business and the needs it has around processing faxes. Included in
absolutely.
that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Absolutely, David. I was saying those are some great points. And what I was going to discuss, and I apologize for the interruption, I'm very excited to partake in this webinar, is you touched upon a very important point, is that, you know, as it says here, we don't want it to be a daunting task for our clients, for our partners and customers, because we offer the tools, the knowledge base to make this a streamlined process for our customers. So it's a very easy migration over from any type of legacy systems. And what we want to do is not have any type of interruption from the user standpoint or from, you know, a third-party legacy solution that we're migrating. So very important topics I would be talking about throughout this presentation is how did IAS and BizCom perform these tasks for, you know, David Burdett's organization and for many others.
Yep, agreed. And I think also a big part of this is a lot of times customers will have legacy integrations or applications and workflows that have been in place for obviously very long periods of time. Perhaps the folks that deployed those aren't with the organization anymore. So there's a lot of angst, I think, in how you're going to make those work with a new environment, as we're going to learn in a couple slides here as David and I get into the details of his organization. But then also a lot of our enterprise customers have a very diverse set of user groups, departments, that they have to accommodate that have different needs for their retention and archival, their security and compliance. And so a lot of that comes in, especially also with user training. If someone is, I think as a lot of IT folks know, once users are set in their ways, they really don't like to change. So helping make that as easy as possible and making the business more accepting of moving on to a new platform and providing that additional capability. And I think another piece, too, that we're going to look at here when we get into it with David is for some of our large enterprises, a big challenge with this is the timing that's involved when you have different groups and different sets of users, and in some cases geographically located across different areas, and how that downtime and service interruption is going to play out when you try to make the move from a legacy platform to a new one.
No, absolutely, those are great points. And making sure that the solution they move forward to, like the BizCom FaxCom solution, is really able to deliver, you know, a simple task of email to fax to really complex environments with third-party integrations, anything of that sort. So BizCom is able to meet those requirements. Also, we've had a lot of experience in migrating a lot of large customers like David Burdett's. So along with, you know, understanding the current needs of customers going through these projects, what we bring to the table as a team, IAS and BizCom, is a really huge knowledge base and best practices to further streamline the whole process for the customers.
Yep, I agree. Well, let's take a look at the situation that David was faced with.
Great.
So I'd like to introduce David Burdett. Again, as Julie mentioned, he's the IT service manager and was the individual who took on this project for a large global pharmaceutical distributor who had over the years shared, gone through many acquisitions, expanded, and was essentially put into a position where I think a lot of our customers probably have one or two solutions today that they're looking at needing to either upgrade or move to a new platform. But David's organization was in a far more complex situation and had up to 15, actually I think it was a few more than that, systems that they had acquired and were managing. And David, if you'd like, could you share a little bit about kind of where the organization was when we started this process and some of the challenges that we were facing at the onset?
Sure. Thanks, David. Yeah, the overview there is accurate. We had grown as an organization through acquisition. Individual business units, that had operated in the past in complete silos, had their own fact solutions, their own retention periods, their own integrations to legacy applications, and so we did have some significant challenges as we started trying to look at an enterprise standard and something that we could implement to satisfy our corporate governance for security, retention, and those things without disrupting the businesses that have kind of operated independently for many years. Some of the key things that were important to us that we dealt with as we started that discovery was, what are the different business requirements for high availability? Do they have, seasonal needs that we may have one division that ramps up for a particular period of the year and then ramps down? SLAs, for each one of those business units. So each one of them kind of offered or had brought their own significant nuances and challenges along the way, and we spent quite a bit of time working with Instant Info Systems before we'd even selected a vendor in just fleshing out what those requirements were and looking for some guidance on selecting an enterprise partner.
Yeah, and I think one of the items that you and I talked about a lot early on, and this is something we hear from a lot of our enterprise customers, was affixing costs to different groups. And in some of the legacy platforms and cloud solutions that we've worked with, a lot of times IT has a lot of difficulty if they want to bill back to customers or to different departments for access to a centralized system like that. And I think there were some very unique tools within BizCom that you all were able to take advantage of. But I believe that was also a big component of this, was how IT would be able to work with those varying groups and in different departments.
Yeah, well put. That was another big get that was presented as a challenge to us, was how are we going to report? How are we going to build these back? How can we use an enterprise platform to realize those economies of scale? And everyone recognized the inefficiency of what we had, but it was nobody was stepping forward to try to tackle that. And so that's one of the key differentiators in this case for us, was having a partner that not only could do it, but we could do it with out-of-the-box tools that they provided, rather than having to do a lot of customization.
Yeah. And I think, too, on the administration front, while we had these 15 different solutions, in many cases, this was kind of like almost 15 different companies, if you wanted to break it down that way. And so having all of these different interfaces and all of these different toolkits that you had to manage for each group, that based on what they were using, was pretty challenging for you all, as far as when you had to go make a change, add a user, if you had to gather reports based on usage or identify if a service was having an outage, that having so many different interfaces to go look at was very difficult. And a big part of what we looked at from the beginning was, is there a central place where IT would be able to access that type of data if it was going to be supporting 15 some odd different businesses, really, and even more than that when you get into the unique user groups. But I think that was a big challenge for you all at the beginning also.
Yep, absolutely.
And I remember, too, being on those calls, David, where the business owners of those groups wanted the migration to happen, but they wanted to make sure it was seamless. They wanted to be up and running, ASAP. They wanted to make sure that the feature set remained the same, and then you had some additional features that would give them, a more streamlined approach to meet their SLAs and even better times. So there were really interesting conversations, and it's something that we see that trends throughout all our customers when we're working on consolidating, large environments like your organization. So it's always interesting to share. It's really a sharing of knowledge, and hopefully everyone on the line can take all this information and take it in. And it seems like it's a daunting task at first, but once you start to nail down all the requirements, it's very easy. And with the knowledge base we bring to the table, IIS and BizCom, we're able to meet all those requirements.
Yeah, I think when we started the discovery process and we needed to find how the different groups and users were accessing all the individual platforms that they were on, we sort of identified the shortfall there of doing the reporting, finding out what users were sending, what users were receiving, when their peaks were. And so as we're going to see a little bit later in the presentation, the reporting, alerting, and monitoring piece of this really, I think, came up to the top of the list at the end of the day for how David's organization was going to even remotely administer this and make it successful for his business. And
Absolutely.
I think also, and David, on top of that, the other major part of this was the integrations. Obviously, with all these different platforms, just about everybody was using something differently or in a different way. And so as we went through this, there were just a lot of different platforms. Even sometimes within the same platform, we had different versions of that software that we're running that we're using legacy API calls, legacy embedded codes, or simple print-based integrations. But I know that was a big part of the discovery here that we helped you all with in trying to identify how all these different applications and user groups were sending and receiving their documents.
Right. And Antoinette touched it a moment ago. There were owners of those integrations that were hungry for the change, but didn't want any interruption in the process. And as we started talking with them about, pain points in previous upgrades or previous integrations, one of them that comes to mind had an in-house built CRM with a legacy integration that when we started the discussion with them about, explaining to us what are the inputs, how was this, configured in the legacy platform, they set the expectation it's going to take about 6 months for our CRM vendor to be engaged and to help you integrate with another platform. And we spent, a considerable amount of time discussing with them what that might be, and then we're able to partner with them to actually give us the inputs, like not worry about necessarily how the integration was going to be done, but just provide us the inputs, let us know what the outputs are, and handed those to IIS and BizCom and said, okay, this is what the application is providing, this is what they need back. And something that, our expectation was it was going to take several months to do, I believe they turned it around in 36 hours and had us back a proof of concept based on the input file we provided, an output and results file back in the exact format that the CRM needed to consume. And then it was just working through a couple of minor details. But I think that was the thing that really wowed some of our internal business partners, was that they could just replicate or replace those legacy integrations without us having to go through engagement of 2 or 3 other vendors, without the lengthy cycles that previous projects had involved. We had another one that was quite similar a few months later into the process, where we discovered another platform that was receiving a large PDF file every morning, and was actually paying for yet a third piece of software to parse that and break it into documents and then integrate to another fax solution to send it out. We said, oh, okay, BizCom, what can you do with this? And handed them the input file, and they said, actually, we can do both those steps. And again, 24, 48 hours later, we're providing the testable results back to our business. And they were pleasantly shocked that we were able to partner with someone who could turn those around that quickly. And the speed of the speed and the accuracy of it were just not something that they were used to. So the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive.
And we've seen that with some other customers too, because we do have a lot of legacy production fax customers. And one of the tools that I know we used with your organization was, a lot of times it's the easy answer is, well, let's just scrap whatever was in place and write to the new web services API, and we'll just put all the development in and redo it from the bottom up. But realistically, when the project got going and as we had different groups that came on and timelines started to shift with, well, this data center is going to go offline, or this service contract is going to renew. If we don't get them off of it, then we're going to face more cost. And one of the keys that BizCom was able to accommodate is that we can take those legacy outputs and simply direct them to BizCom without doing any changes to what the host application is sending to the legacy system, and be able to interpret that with no additional development and have it work on the new platform. And while I think, ideally you may not want to keep that legacy in place when it comes to meeting deadlines and moving users off of systems that need to be retired, I think that was really beneficial for us to keep the project on task and on timelines that we needed to meet for those groups.
Yeah, absolutely. David and Dave, that's crucial. And I do want to tout our engineering group here at BizCom. We have a dynamic group, and I have to tell you, with the assistance of our customers, which we really truly recognize as partners, year over year of taking these migrations and learning from them and developing tools, we have achieved a set of tools now that David Burdett is talking about, and Dave Angelitis from IAS, that really simplify the whole process. And that's why we want to deliver this webinar today, to really talk about it. And anyone that's out there listening today that kind of has that fear of how large a project can be, we want you to know we can really simplify it with these tools. And we'll dig in deeper, and please, ask as many questions as possible. We really want you to learn, and we want to be able to educate. Another thing I want to mention that I think is really crucial in these type of projects, and David Burdett, you can chime in if you'd like, is when David Angelitis and David Burdett were working through the process, we engaged other customers that had similar migrations that were already BizCom customers. And they were able to share a lot of their knowledge and their design and architecture of what they had done. So, with this partnership comes a lot of knowledge, not just from IIS and BizCom, but our customers partake in the process as well. So we're really big on sharing that knowledge of our customers to our new customers that are coming on board, and really giving them that access to that information to make their migration much more simplified.
Yep. And Anthony, I think two of the areas where we saw that were with transport and retention specifically. With transport, we've had requests from customers where, what do I do when my PRI or my primary lines are down? And BizCom has the capability to have both traditional trunking as well as hybrid or cloud-based delivery. And so as David was evaluating the different business units that he had, some of them were on cloud services today and carried a higher cost of operation in order to transmit their faxes. But the compliance and the SLAs that were tied to them justified those costs. And when we were looking at the platform, the BizCom platform, to take over those faxing needs, one of the key differentiators was that BizCom would have the capability to take certain users' traffic or integrations and direct them through the traditional lower cost trunking, in some cases even SIP trunking, and they were able to deal with the higher failure rates of those. But with specific groups, they were able to direct that traffic either part of the time or only during outages or during seasonal peaks through a cloud option that would provide higher SLAs and more guaranteed delivery in case there was a problem with the trunking. And so having that flexibility, I think both for seasonal use as well as disaster recovery and just higher SLA customers, was a really key part of the flexibility to accommodate users that had those different levels of requirements when it came to how long could they be down and how quickly do faxes need to be delivered or received. And then likewise with retention, the piece on that was a lot of times we'll have unique business units or groups that want to have the storage of the faxes in a different location than the rest of the users or groups. And a lot of times that, again, is a large global pharmaceutical distributor, that can be tied to the type of drugs that are in use, or if there's a group that has more compliance or regulatory oversight on it, you may want to store those faxes on higher cost, higher speed storage options, whereas the general desktop faxing community maybe could go on to a lower cost NAS or SAN. And the BizCom allowed David to take those groups and users, store the faxes in different locations based on their requirements, and then also same thing with the cloud piece, have those users or groups have access to cloud delivery if their traditional path was unavailable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of these projects that everyone can attest to is you're trying to meet all technical specifications, but there's an ROI perspective that comes into play with these projects, as well as when you're doing any type of migration, facelift, upgrade, whatever we want to call it, we want to definitely make sure that it is cost effective for the business units and the overall organizations. So by going in with a hybrid model like David Burdett and his organization chose to go with, it really met all requirements, but there was a lot of cost savings involved as well.
And I think, so while the technology was important, as we just went through all the different ways that they had to accommodate their user groups, I think so too was who they partnered with. And as David alluded to, and I think Antoinette mentioned earlier, there was a lot of investigation on the front end of this, speaking with references, talking to other customers, evaluating the existing platforms that David's organization was already using. And one of the key differentiators for Instant Info Systems is that we have 25 years of experience within the fax industry, but we also do not work with simply one fax platform. We work with multiple fax platforms in addition to BizCom, as well as multiple hybrid, as well as fully hosted cloud solutions. So when we were looking at all the different platforms that David had in use, there was a lot of familiarity from our technical team with understanding how those systems had been deployed with the legacy user groups and how we were going to be able to accommodate those on the BizCom platform. And David, I think you spent a lot of time, maybe 6 months, even a year on the front end of this, speaking with BizCom customers and just talking about how a project like this would unfold.
Yeah, that's correct. So we really leveraged IAS as a consultant in this. We talked about a different mix of vendors and products, what the pain points that our business was relaying to us, with their existing solutions, whether they were on-prem, hybrid, or cloud. And then we were provided some of those points of contact for people who were a year or two ahead of us in this journey, that it had large enterprises, lots of legacy integrations, multiple vendor products for fax, and how they talked to them about their migration experience. What did they learn? What did they wish they had known before they started? And how their experience as a customer with BizCom had been, and it was very valuable to us. We used a lot of that consultation with BizCom engineers, explaining these are our pain points. They asked a lot of follow-up questions that were very valuable in helping us, down selecting what modular component of the application suite we should use, how, what are some pitfalls to avoid. And, and this was all before we actually got to the point where we were deploying anything. So it prepared us when we're working with our relationship managers, with the business owners, and even the frontline agents that would be, using a product that we were trying to migrate them to as an enterprise standard. Helped us be prepared to answer their questions, to provide guidance when necessary, and if we didn't know the answer, we had a partner that we could reach out to quickly gather it.
Yeah, and I think once we were able to get all that front-end information and discovery done and understand the diverse requirements, it became very clear that BizCom offered the toolkit as well as the partnership and expertise that we were going to need to do this. And so when we picked BizCom, I think it showed, and Antoinette, if you want to talk a little bit about this, David just mentioned the modular design that would allow them to accommodate the diverse user groups, but then also the job tracking tools, the reporting and alerting to be able to manage the enterprise that they would need to be servicing.
Absolutely. And really, when you look at the history of BizCom, we've been doing this for 30 years. IAS has been doing it for 25. So we bring a wealth of knowledge. What we've learned internally, what we've learned from our customers and the industry. But one thing about BizCom is every year that passes, we're innovating. We're coming up with newer technologies. We're coming up with additional features because faxing is mission critical more now than it was 20 years ago because of the integrations in third parties, if it's an EMR and EHR and so on. But fax is so critical. And, sometimes we're talking internally and we're like, people may think it's just fax, but fax is basically, we're dealing with organizations that, are caring for heart transplant patients or, other organizations that are doing money orders to third world countries so people that are here can send money to their family for food and, medical supplies. So it's more than just fax. So we really put a lot of time in understanding customers' needs, really developing the products so they can further streamline for business owners like David Burdett, because we understand how important it is for him to deliver as well. But really, I do want to say this for everyone on the line is we put our customers first. We always have, and that's why we partnered with IIS. They have the same philosophy about customers, about product, and about delivery. So when you look and take a deep dive into what BizCom offers as you're looking at your project, you'll see why many of the Fortune 100 and 500 organizations have chosen to work with IIS and BizCom.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think once we made the decision that BizCom was going to be the platform that would work for David's organization, obviously then we began the arduous task of the actual migration process itself. And I think, David, if you want to talk a little bit about this, I think a big key to this with such a diverse set of users like you had, especially coming from all these different platforms, was flexibility. And I think the flexibility was in two areas. One, the technology having to be flexible, but then also the BizCom teams and the Instant Info teams, once the project got started, being flexible as changes arose. But being able, I think, from a specific department by department or user by user basis, you mentioned earlier, there were some groups that wanted to come over, but either could or couldn't for a various number of reasons. And using the toolkit that BizCom had available to us to accommodate those needs, the ones that were planned and then the ones that surprised us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really was the differentiator for us, was the modular design, being able to upgrade a component at a time or an integration for a single application or business unit one at a time without necessarily interrupting any other operation. That has been invaluable for us as we've gone through this migration together, and was really the key in the latent migrations that had happened with some of those other platforms and the reasons that some of them had not been upgraded or replaced for years at a time because it was just too complex. If you made a change to one integration point on one of the legacy fax applications, it impacted all businesses and all users of it, and that is just a different way of building this with BizCom. And so as we brought on a single department or a single group of users, we were able to do it seamlessly. In many cases, we were able to do the migrations during the business day and allow us to, all we had to do was test the toll-free routing once we were complete, get confirmation back from our users that their new faxes were arriving in their new client. And that is just something that would have been unheard of with some of our legacy platforms. We were able to also provide the redundancy, we're listing here about the advanced fax routing rules and how we leverage those for each one of these. Really, to say that they take the customer's needs to heart is an understatement. We spent quite a bit of time direct with the customers and with IS and BizCom, directly interfacing, understanding, as Antonetta mentioned, these in a pharmaceutical or healthcare environment, these have minute by minute implications. We don't want to interrupt anything in the business's workflow because there is a human component, and the partnership and the commitment that we've received from this group as we've gone through these migrations has been unmatched.
Yeah, and I think part of that we talked about before was, what happens to your best laid plans. And when we were in the project, because of all the different solutions that were out with the legacy user groups, we had things where data centers were being closed or coming offline, or trunking was going to be pulled for different groups and users. And even though that wasn't planned at a given point in time, I think the BizCom team, as well as Juan and the IIS technical team, did a good job of, when those things came up, being able to move those to the front of the line and get them over so that you could meet the deadlines and the timelines that you needed for all the different groups. Or if a cloud service was coming to an end, and if we didn't have those users migrated onto the new platform, then the cloud service contract was going to renew for another year, and we'd have a whole another 12 months of cost incurred. And so I think a lot of that too was the flexibility around, when these things came up, being able to adapt on the fly and make sure that we got the users moved over to meet the timelines that your business needed.
Yep, absolutely. And like you said, planned or unplanned, they were able to step up and help us in each one of those cases, whether it was a renewal or a data center going offline, or something as seemingly harmless as migrating to Office 365 for email. When one of those legacy integrations broke, we could just immediately accelerate that business unit's migration over to BizCom. And so there were multiple examples of that as we went through this process. And because of that modular design and because of the team that we had working with us, they were able to meet those challenges each time.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think, so a key to this, and I want to shift gears now to the enterprise fax management tool, is that the lacking of reporting, alerting, and monitoring that exists in some of the legacy applications we work with. And as we were doing these migrations and we were pulling people over, needing to be able to identify if there was any hiccup with the traffic or any issues with in-job faxes being returned with busy signals, or outbound jobs backing up or queuing up. And BizCom has a great fax management tool that allowed David to have a view of what was going on as these groups came over and understand immediately if an issue was arising. And I'd like to shift now, Antonetta, if you could take over and introduce Gus and your team to take a look at the enterprise fax management tool.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David and David. I'm very excited. I want to introduce Gus Agudelo. He's our Senior Development Engineer. And Gus, I want to give you a lot of kudos, has worked for quite a while on developing EFM, as we call it, Enterprise Fax Management. The great thing about BizCom and Gus and his team in general is that, yes, they focus internally amongst, the engineering team on coming up with concepts and tools that, will assist and help our customers and enterprises like David Burdett. But what we do is we take it a step further. We like to meet with customers. We travel to them. We try to understand all their business requirements. So when we deliver a tool, it's actually assisting in really streamlining their job, making it easier. And with EFM, basically, I know that we've referred this as a single pane. It allows our customers to take full control of their fax environment. We're going to be doing a live demo shortly, but I really want to touch upon a few major things of EFM. It gives you the ability to view and manage your entire environment in a single pane of glass. This was the strategy behind the whole, concept of EFM. Also, a big thing that you heard earlier in the conversation is being able to make updates or add a feature set to one business unit or one application without touching any others. And when you're dealing with enterprises like David Burdett's, you can have 15 different ones. You can have 50 different user groups up to, 500. Each one may have a different requirement. So if we need to update the client on one group, but you don't want to update, in the other 30, this gives you the ability to make updates. And if we want to turn it back, you're able to do that as well. So you can set alarms for real-time notification. You can control multiple levels of access to view and manage. Another great thing that Gus will be showing you is you can develop different panes, different views of what's important to your organization. You can develop policies and dynamically apply changes across all the environment. So without further ado, I definitely want to get to the live demo because this is important for everyone to actually see the power behind EFM. So Gus, please, introduce yourself, and we're very eager to see it live.
Yeah, thanks, Antonetta. As Antonetta has said, I'm going to do a live demo of the enterprise management, and I'll wait to make sure that you can see the screen. Let me know when that happens.
And Gus, we have the screen up. I was going to mention very quickly before you get started here for our audience, we're going to see the term fax queues as well as FaxCom servers here. And a queue is essentially a group. It's an integration, if you want to think of it that way, or a unique set of group and users. So you could think of it that way. And then with the FaxCom servers, that is the BizCom terminology for a board or a transport. So essentially a Brook Trout board that maybe has a PRI plugged into it, for example.
David, great point. Thank you very much for that.
Okay. All right. Well, so continuing on with that, what I've brought up here is the homepage of the Enterprise Fax Management. And the Enterprise Fax Management is built around the concept of having multiple consoles. You can install as many consoles as you want. Each console represents a certain segment or area of your fax environment. As we spoke about, sometimes you can have 15 or more different fax integrations or applications. So what I've done is I've created a demo or a sample company that has migrated into the BizCom system, and I'm going to show how that migration would appear inside this Enterprise Fax Management window. I've created about 9 or so consoles, and what I'm going to say about this environment is actually a result of 2 companies that emerged together, one called Corp and one called EngLab. And what this enterprise management allows you to do, for instance, create a console that will let you see everything you have installed for the Corp side of your organization, and everything that you have installed for your EngLab side of your organization. I'm also going to continue to say that there was 3 applications that were migrated. For the Corp side of the organization, there was a fax to email system that needed to be migrated. And there was also a system that was doing purchase order fulfillments based on the web client. And for the EngLab side of the organization, there was also a different mail to fax because they were using a different mail system in this case. So you can see I've also created consoles for those environments. And then as David was sort of mentioning, the BizCom product is based on the concept of FaxCom queues and FaxCom servers. The FaxCom servers do all the faxing. They have all the mechanics to deal with phone lines and the actual fax transport, but they don't need to be aware at all about any integration specifics or how the faxing is actually taking place through the organization. That's taken care of by the FaxCom queues. So the FaxCom servers themselves just provide sort of like a high available, highly redundant system of computers that provide the faxing for the FaxCom queues. So in this particular migration, we're saying that all the FaxCom servers were installed in 2 data centers to sort of create that redundant available system. And they were created at an East Coast data center and a West Coast data center. And so that's what this environment is showing. And the consoles that you see here are completely customizable. The titles that I just picked, so that would represent this sample organization the way I wanted to represent it. And descriptions are also completely customizable. So you can create as many consoles and you can have as many different reasons for creating those consoles. Some customers might create consoles based on fax systems using different time zones, or just because they're involved with different groups of administrators that need to manage different systems, etc. So in essence, what this has done is it's created a really good, clear blueprint of the whole environment, what you're actually, how you're using the BISCOM product to provide fax into your environment. And even somebody who wasn't aware of all these specifics, logging into here would instantly see, this is what I have and this is how it's laid out. So that's the first benefit of the enterprise management, is creating that blueprint that's clear and obvious to see. And each one of these, when I click on them, which I will in a couple of seconds, will actually open up a console that allows me to manage and monitor the systems involved in that particular segment of my fax environment. But the other thing too here is that the consoles themselves can be configured to have alarms associated with them. So every console, we have about 45 or 50 different alarms that can be configured to check the health of the systems. And when you come here, you can see that we have two areas that are giving me alarms. So the second benefit is when their alarm comes up, you don't just see an alarm based on the computer name. You know there's an alarm and you know what area of your organization is being impacted by that alarm. So I can see here that my corp email to fax has got an alarm on it, but my PO fulfillment does not, and that's running 100% fine. You can actually see the alarms from here. If I click on the alarm, I can see there's a particular system in there that's having problems delivering emails. And when you click on that, it'll give you more information. We've tried to put as much knowledge as we could in the alarms to sort of give the user or the administrator hints as to where to start beginning to check why this could be a problem. And we also have graphs that will show you a history. So it's maybe hard to see, but right now it's 8 undeliverable emails. There's a blue line at the very top. But if I click here, you can see that this particular condition started Friday afternoon, Friday morning around 8 o'clock in the morning. And you can go back up to about 6 months. I'm not going to be very helpful because, for instance, in this case, you can see that we had no problems until the beginning of this year. So maybe something's changed this year and we're starting to have problems with this. So being able to see a history of alarm conditions can be helpful because there may be problems that do sort of recur. And by seeing how often they recur, it can really help you to, correct that issue that's been happening. If I come down here, the FASTCOM servers at the data center east, I click in there and I see there's a FASTCOM that's not reporting. Again, you can click on that. We try to give you information on where to begin looking, and you can also see the history. So we can see that this condition has been occurring since Monday. So that's the second benefit of having this multi-console view that lets you organize your environment. You've got the blueprint, but you've also got an easy way to track down where there's problems and what it's affecting. And you see that even though all these queues use the FASTCOM servers that are in these two data centers, you see that some of these queues are not having any problems. And I'll show you how that is possible in a couple of seconds. But the first thing I want to mention is another aspect of this is if I do have people that wanted to see or felt they had the need to see certain aspects of this environment, you can actually share for administration privileges or just for monitoring any one of these consoles to additional administrators. So for instance, let's say you already had a legacy system running the email to fax or this core web PO fulfillment application. You already had a legacy system that you replaced, but there were some administrators related to that system that still wanted to have a visibility into how that works. You wouldn't want them to see everything that you see in here because you basically are not providing services for your whole organization, but these particular administrators still want to have some visibility into that. Well, you can actually share out these consoles for administration and monitoring to other administrators. And I have a copy of a browser running here as a different administrator. And if I bring this one up, you'll see that this particular administrator is only going to see that one console that I've given that administrator access to because they felt like they had a need for that. And you can also see that there's no alarms here. As far as this administrator is concerned, everything is working fine. This administrator doesn't have to know anything about, there may be some undeliverable emails in this other application, and that there's one FASTCOM that's not running because faxes are still going out completely fine. And I'll show you how you'll be able to determine that in a second. I just wanted to mention one thing about this sharing because it's done through a browser, which means that it's very easy within the application to select an administrator and say they have access to this console. Then all you have to do is send an email to that administrator with a link saying, go ahead and log in, and they will see what they have access to. And that's actually a huge benefit because with a lot of legacy systems, particularly if you're using a Windows administration, in order to delegate administration to somebody, you have to give them possibly remote desktop access to a system. And when they log into that system and launch the application, they may need to have access to other systems related to the faxing. So it can be very difficult, if not impossible, to delegate administration. So this is another benefit of the enterprise management. Another benefit of being able to break down the whole environment to subsections, categories. But now let me show you how, going back to this screen, how even though we have an alarms happening on our fax servers, it doesn't impact this particular application. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on this console so you can see what the actual management window looks like. Okay, so the first thing that happens is when I come in here, it reminds me that there's an alarm. So this Faxcom is not reporting. If I click in here, now I can see what I have, what I have installed at the data center East for fax servers. It's got these two fax servers, Faxcom 1 and Giagodella Win 7. And again, you can see Faxcom 1 is unreachable. Again, if you can click on the alarm and see the actual alarm, it's the same alarm view that we saw from the home screen. But here you get much more than just that alarm in the category. Here you actually can, by clicking on these fax servers, you can manage properties. But you also have the monitoring aspect. You have the graphs that are giving you real-time information to what's going on with these systems. So if you look at this here, this is the last 3-hour view, and you can see that this particular fax server is running, and it's only running at about 25% utilization. Here, this graph gives you the number of ports that are being used for transmit and for receive. So you can see why it's really not a problem that one fax server is down, because those applications are using this particular fax server, and there's plenty of room for expansion. So that fax server is just there for redundancy. So if I was the administrator managing this particular console, it would be my job to make sure to bring this fax server up so that if there's ever another problem, systems will continue to run. But administrators managing applications, the actual integration pieces, wouldn't have to know about this, and everything they would see would look perfectly fine. Another information we'll give you here is, the fax server is sending about 900 pages an hour. And then it's giving you a breakup of errors, connection errors. And right now, there's absolutely no errors right now. This system is running internally in the lab, so you would not see any errors. But in most of, at a real production site, you would probably see somewhere around 10% connection errors and maybe 20-25% non-connection errors. And all these graphs, alarms can be triggered based on all this information. So if, fax server stops sending faxes, you can have an alarm trigger on that because you do expect faxes to be going out during certain hours. Connection errors do increase beyond what you expect. You can have an alarm set off on that. That could be an indication that phone lines are getting noisy, they're getting corrupted for some reason. And one of the things you'll find with these alarms is that even though they're monitoring the BISCOM systems, I would say just about all the time, every time the alarms that get triggered will be related to systems that BISCOM is communicating to rather than the BISCOM systems themselves, whether it be mail servers or phone lines or file servers, SharePoint servers, etc. So the alarms don't just monitor BISCOM software, they actually are monitoring the software that communicates to BISCOM. But for instance, number of faxes, pages being sent, if that went down to 0, it could just be that some automated process that was running beyond BISCOM that was submitting faxes had failed. So these alarms are designed not just to monitor our software, but to monitor how the software is expected to perform, and based on that, it basically is monitoring everything involved with faxing beyond our software, the applications that submit faxes and the actual phone lines and even the phone company that's allowing that faxing to take place.
Gus,
you can go
we
back.
are running. Yeah. Gus, we're running short on time, and I know
Okay.
from having lived in this console, we could go another 2 hours if we wanted. But I think we've got a great idea here of how we can break this down and give different groups and administrators views into all the different components. And what I'd say to the audience is that if we'd like to spend some more time or you'd like to do a deeper dive into this toolkit, please let us know after the webinar and we can set up a custom demonstration so Gus can continue to go through all the different settings.
Yeah, that sounds good. Um,
And then Gus, I think if you can pass the controls back over.
I think they have been already.
Excellent. And I think a big part of this too, and what really helped David with this as we deployed this for his organization, was being able to give those administrators and groups that he brought in their own views and access into what their faxes were doing, but without having to view every single part of what the enterprise platform was servicing with the other groups. And a big piece of this that I think we can do in a custom view for customers if they'd like to see it is the audit capabilities. And we didn't get into that with Gus because we ran out of time, but really there's a extremely detailed, complete audit log of everything and anyone that touches the environment, so that as you give this access to folks within an organization, you'll always know who did what, when, why, and how. And if we can move forward, the other piece I wanted to do just real quick, I wanted to introduce Juan Cueva. He is the director of our technical services and was engaged with David and his team from the beginning of the project and doing the discovery and deployment. I just wanted him to talk a little bit about how, while this seemed overwhelming at the onset with complexity, that as we dug into the details, we were really able to break this down and make it much easier, and what led to a successful migration.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Yeah, absolutely. And, Instant Info Systems has worked with many companies of different sizes. Many large ones like the one that we work here with David Burdett, and some smaller ones, that may have had smaller needs that may have just been looking, for example, to migrate to the cloud. With this particular project, it really involved a true partnership, as we've heard throughout this webinar here, with the customer, with David Burdett. I mean, he's obviously taking the role of taking all the business requirements and really gathering that information and then basically bringing them to IIS and BizCom so that we can take a look at what those requirements are and match them up. That we list here the discovery portion and really understanding the customer needs through that discovery to basically understand what those components are, what the migrations are going to be, what the integrations are going to consist of. The user directories, seamlessly integrating for authentication, verification, and the management of the overall environment. And within that, creating an audit trail, reaching compliance through the auditing and the user integration. Within data migration, understanding the retention and purging requirements within the organization and really being able to adapt to that. We saw the screen where you're able to adapt, per user, per group, per department basis. And then the integrations, particularly around, as we've heard, the seamless integrations. With the modular design that we have with BizCom, where we're able to really take a look at each one of those integration points and easily be able to migrate those through, whether it was through the web services integration, the doc flow, advanced fax routing for the inbound components. The modular integration really brings those seamless integrations, allowing us to further streamline the integration and then reaching compliance as well, which is also important. And then, overall, the migration support, working together as a team to bring each one of those integrations into production. David Burdett has implemented, some of the best practices with a dev environment, with a test environment, and production. So while we're able to migrate everything to the production environment that's ready to move there, we're able to easily test out new integrations in the dev environment and take it through those phases, and then bring them on into production once those have been tested and vetted out. So those are some of the components, and we will work through supporting this on an ongoing basis as well. Afterwards through our support team and making that integration and that transition seamless. So I'll turn this over to Julie now so that we can get into some of the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Juan, and thank you to our entire panel of speakers today. David Burdett, we really appreciate your participation today, and of course, Antoinetta and Gus and David Angelitis. We had a lot of information to deliver today, so thank you so much. We have a lot of questions, and we are right up at the hour here. So I know for many of you, you'll need to drop off, but we will just take a couple of minutes. I'm going to try to consolidate some of these questions into key topics because many of you had similar questions around the same general topics regarding security, cloud, faxing, etc. So maybe we can cover off on several of these at once. Really quick, many of you did ask if the webinar will be recorded and if that recording is available. The answer is yes. Keep an eye out for an email from us in the next day or so, and we'll send you a link to this recorded webinar. We got several questions regarding transports. If this solution supports cloud faxing, if cloud fax is available for failover. We have one question regarding SIP connections. Somebody said their current solution only allows 100% on-premise SIP or 100% cloud. So would this allow for some flexibility between those two transports? So I'd like to turn this over to the group to talk a little bit about the options in transports with the BizCom solution. Maybe Antonetta, you could take that one.
I can definitely take that question. So great question. So really the power behind the BizCom solution that you'll hear from a David Burdett or many clients is that our FaxCom software is the same software for both our on-premise and for our cloud offering. So it is transparent to applications or users. So it's a hybrid model. So in David Burdett's case, he has on-premise VoIP servers, and for peak overflow and DR strategy, he also is communicating to the BizCom cloud. So again, our software is communicating to both platforms simultaneously with no absolute difference, either cloud or on-premise, same feature set.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Somebody asked about security. So our when faxes are being sent from clinical applications, how secure are they? And then a specific question regarding support for McKesson Now Allscripts. So David Angelides or Antonetta, either one of you can probably handle that one.
Yeah, we can both answer it. I can start, and then David, you always have great responses along with mine, so we'll do it as a team effort. So definitely from a security standpoint, we've built all our products off a very high level of security because everything that's being faxed, either healthcare, finance, pharmacy, manufacturing, all has to fall under some regulatory regulation. So fax in general is secure, and then we've added layers. So either if you're going to use our cloud services or on-premise, we do abide by all the security levels that are required by organizations. And we can definitely deliver. We have our SS18 report that's just come out, and we're happy to share with our customers once an NDA is signed. And we also have a security team that is available to all prospective IAS BizCom clients and to our customers. And the main goal is to make sure that we answer all those questions and the team that we're working with is satisfied.
Yeah, and I'll just add that security is a major component of this. It was a key factor in David selecting BizCom. As we talked about in the presentation, he's able to store faxes. They can be stored in an encrypted state, but then you can also store faxes by different users or groups in different locations for even more added security if you wanted to put them in a specific location within the network. And then also the fax system just being capable of accommodating those users from a retention standpoint and doing archival. So if you have specific groups that need to keep faxes for extended periods of time and others that don't, the software does allow for you to do that in an encrypted state and for whatever period of time that you need and whatever location that you need them stored.
Great point. And also for our cloud services from BizCom, one important feature, it is a transient service, so we're not storing any faxes within our data centers.
Perfect. Thanks, you guys. Couple other. Go ahead.
I think, Julie, I want to make sure I answer. I think there was a question regarding Allscripts. So that is something that BizCom and IAS is working towards. There are ways of integrating today through some of our tools that we can definitely talk to you about what we're able to replicate anything you're doing today to the BizCom solution.
Perfect. Here's one regarding the administration. The question is, can the administration be modular so that there can be different administrators managing the system between departments?
Yeah, and we saw that. Julie, I can take this. This is David. At the end of the presentation where Gus was going through that console management, you absolutely can break that down and give certain users certain control or just visibility into each unique user or group, and then determine what they have access and visibility to.
Perfect. Another admin reporting alarming here. Can alarms include warning emails?
Yes.
And those alarms too, I'll just add to it, can be changed based on threshold. So one business unit may say, if I have 5 fax jobs waiting to go, alert me. And another unit could say, if I have 100 fax jobs waiting to go, then send me alert. So you can set those thresholds for varying groups based on what their tolerance is to any type of disruption in the sending and receiving of the faxes.
Perfect. Here's another question regarding modularity of the admin. Is billing also modular? I think we definitely saw that with David Burdett's organization as well. David Angelitis, can you speak to that?
Yeah, it really comes down to we didn't get into the reporting tool as much. We saw the dashboard where we're seeing the alerts and the alarms, but also on the back end, there are reports that can be customized based on user group, queues, or even the Faxcom server if you wanted to see all the volume going out of one board, for example. But that you can run those reports and schedule them on a weekly, monthly, daily basis, whatever interval you need, and have those generated so that you can have the billing broken down by how many fax did a group send, how many pages did they send for those bill back capabilities. And that was a big part of David Burdett's deployment of this, was being able to bill back certain units based on the volume of faxing that they were doing.
Great. And so similarly, someone just asked, for incoming faxes, can multiple people have the same fax number? Maybe for a department.
Yes,
yeah, Juan,
that would be,
that? The short answer is yes.
Yes. So a couple people do it different ways. You can have, a incoming fax be distributed to many users. So a copy goes to each user's inbox. You can have a shared mailbox or a public folder, and then have users have access to that public folder, shared mailbox. So to answer it, yes. And then what we'd like to do is probably dig in deeper and understand the requirements, but it's an absolute yes, and then we'll give best business practices towards that as well.
Yeah, Antonetta, we have a couple customers where I think for that individual question, we have folks that are doing claims processing, for example, and it's not a single individual that's processing. And there's been a lot of customization there to help with having certain groups or users that come on or off shift at different times, but have access to that portal inbox.
Great. I am trying to cover off on as many common topics as we can. There is a quick question, though. Maybe Juan can speak to this because I know we have experience with this. Does your solution need to work with our telecom department as well in order to configure the solution?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the different transports, and within telephony, we can basically integrate with your internal network, and whether it's Cisco or actual PRIs. We also have several hybrid configurations that we have available and that we have been able to integrate. One of the things that we talked about that was unique to this customer was that we were able to do both. We were able to integrate with the transport locally and then be able to have the cloud type of transport for those seasonal needs or for backup or redundancy. Perfect.
Thank you. All right, we are at 11 past the hour. I'm going to try to just take one or two more questions here. A lot of questions regarding the transport. So somebody had asked if the demo that we saw today was if we were showing an on-prem interface or cloud or hybrid. And then somebody else has asked about do you have solutions which do not utilize a physical fax board in the server? So maybe we can spend a few more times. I know, Antonetta, you mentioned your interface is totally seamless between on-premise and cloud, but maybe we can circle back on that as well.
Absolutely. So to touch upon the question, there was a few within that. So BizCom offers your on-premise T1 PRI, analog and virtual VoIP solutions, as well as cloud, and they work interchangeably, and they run as a hybrid model. So to answer the question, we do still provide on-premise solutions, and we provide hybrid or we provide full cloud services. So based on what we see when speaking with a customer, there's a lot that comes into play with determining what would be the best fit. So if, just ROI comes into the conversation, if it's management and your CIO saying we want to keep everything on premise, or you'll have CIOs that want to bring everything into the cloud. The great thing about us is that we can deliver on any requirement that is set forth. So if it's a cloud-only solution, we have that. If it's hybrid, where you're running both cloud and on-premise, we're the only fax solution in the marketplace that has the same interface for both its on-premise solution and its cloud. And that is the power behind our solution in large enterprises like David Burdett. It gives him the ability to offset and develop a DR strategy without bringing on another set of virtual servers by DRing to our cloud. So to answer your question, yes, we do provide it, and that is the power behind the BizCom overall solution, is having the same front end for both our cloud and on-premise solution.
Antonetta, I was going to add one point, just from some real-world deployments that we've worked on recently. We're seeing a lot more folks that opt not to have a local PRI or T1 circuit in their data centers. A lot of times those trunks are being discontinued or not allowed if you wanted to get a new one, for example. And so carriers are providing SIP trunking services, which the BizCom platform does integrate with. However, I will say that from a reliability standpoint, we're seeing more and more often that when it comes to faxing over SIP trunks, a lot of times customers are experiencing higher failure rates. So a lot of times where we're seeing customers balance this is that they'll try to send faxes through the SIP trunking circuits, and when they fail, they could have a rule set in place so that those go through a cloud option, or they're replacing the SIP infrastructure entirely and having no circuits whatsoever and just using the cloud telephony provider as the main transport for all sending and receiving. So it's very flexible, and we're seeing a lot of more customers move away from the traditional trunking, whether they're forced to or by choice.
Yeah, and everything you saw in today's webinar is for all our solutions. If it's a full cloud-based or a hybrid or on-premise, everything you've seen and we've discussed is offered across the board.
Perfect. With that, we are 15 minutes past the hour, so I really appreciate our audience hanging in there. I can see you've all stuck around for a little extra time today, and we really appreciate that time that you gave to us. So again, a final thank you to our panel of speakers, Antonetta Carboni, Gus Agudelo, David Burdett, David Angelides, and Juan Cueva. Thank you so much for this really informative presentation. Thanks to our audience for sticking around. And as I mentioned before, we will have a recording of this webinar. We will send a link shortly within the next day or so, so keep an eye out for that. And of course, if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can see our contact information on the screen. And certainly for those of you whose questions we didn't have time for today, we will certainly reach out to you and make sure you get that information that you're looking for. So again, thanks to everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.